Want to echo something that Mr. Woodard said in a previous video, how enjoyable it's been to listen to him give his tips and tricks and mnemonic devices for remembering certain things. Hopefully both of our voices will give you plenty of options to help you remember, especially in a chapter like this where there's so many terms and functionality of terms to remember. So with the brainstem, he had mentioned it being called the reptilian brain. I've always used the less eloquent term of the lizard brain. And one of my favorite stories about the lizard brain, in thinking about that, the basic functions of a creature just to survive. My older son used to have a gecko, and we feed the gecko dead crickets. Now, the gecko would stalk the dead crickets and just like look at it, look at it, look at the crickets, and then wait, wait, and then all of a sudden, boom, grab the cricket. And I thought this was a good example of that lizard brain, just survival mode, because its instinct is to stalk its prey. It's not thinking in terms of, is that prey even moving? Is it alive? And so as we start to develop, we get into those upper regions of the brain where we start to throw in emotion and throw in thought. And thinking through logic, rationalizing. And so today I'm going to get you through the rest of the brain stem and then up into the limbic system. So with the brain stem, the last couple of terms that you need to know, and I am going to kind of go with the etymological routes on most of the terms today. I'm going to talk about the Latin meanings of the words, and hopefully that will help you remember some of their functionality as well. So the reticular activating system looks like the long pencil in the brain stem, but it's called the reticular activating system because reticular means net-like. So if you've ever heard of a reticulated python, and look one up, and the markings look like a net on the skin of the python. Well, the reticular activating system looks like a net of nerves. It's not just one structure, it's a structure that's created by all this network of nerves. So the reticular activating system is that long pencil-like structure. It's got this network of nerves in it, and one of the primary functions is arousal and the sleep-wake, whether we're asleep or awake, the conscious level of our awareness. So the reticular activating system, I don't know, thinking about the net-like, I thought about like a blanket, pulling a net or a blanket over you when you're sleeping, might be a good way to remember that. And then the medulla oblongata, this is about as low as you can get on the whole brain stem. And this gives the most basic functions: breathing, heart rate. We used to have puking on this slide. If you ingest a poison, the medulla oblongata will kick in and help you to vomit that poison up. So basic functions from the medulla oblongata. Now, the medulla oblongata, medulla actually means marrow. So if you've ever broken like a chicken bone, there's the marrow of the bone right in the middle of it. They call it the medulla oblongata because it's like the marrow of the spine. If you think about the medulla oblongata kind of being like the top of the spinal cord, that's really the main connection between spinal cord and brain is the medulla oblongata. So it's kind of like the marrow of the spine. Oops, actually I'll leave that on there for just a second here. You can see it's way down there. Then we move up into the limbic system. So humans evolving and brains are starting to get more organized, and then we add this layer of emotion and other functions as well. So the hypothalamus, Mr. Woodard mentioned the hypothalamus. So hypo, under, and then thalamus. Thalamus actually means like inner room. The hypothalamus is going to link the nervous system to the endocrine system. We already talked about this in an earlier video. I liked Mr. Woodard's analogy of the hypothalamus speaking pituitary. So the hypothalamus is going to help us with temperature, hunger, circadian rhythms. It's helping the pituitary to know what hormones to release, or it's telling the pituitary which other glands to communicate with to release certain hormones. Circadian rhythms are a fun one. We'll talk about those later on, talking about our sleep cycles. Won't go into that right now. And then the amygdala, one of the most popular probably brain structures on the AP exam. The amygdala means almond. Amygdala just means almond, and that's because it's almond shaped. The amygdala comes up quite a bit because it has so much to do with our emotions. And you can see there on the slide, particularly fear and aggression. And if you think about it, really heightened emotional states connect with our memories. So heightened emotion is going to be important for remembering certain instances. One of my favorite stories about the amygdala, I was listening to a podcast, and they actually were doing a story about a woman who could feel no fear. She couldn't feel fear. So this was an obvious. Scientists really liked studying this particular person because she didn't know what fear felt like. And so she tells the story for one example. She was walking into a store and there was a guy on a park bench and he asked her to come towards her and she said, "Oh, okay, what do you need?" And he immediately grabbed her and a knife and put the knife up to her throat and said, I'm gonna slit your throat." And she said, "Okay, go ahead and I'll come back and I'll haunt you." And he actually ended up letting her go. She could feel no fear. Well, after a while, they obviously ran tests and experiments, and et cetera, et cetera. They figured out that her amygdala had actually calcified. Calcium had formed around the amygdala, so it couldn't function properly, so she couldn't feel fear. Okay, and hippocampus. Hippo means horse and campus means sea monster. You can kind of see with the black arrow here how it's curved like this. They call it a hippocampus because it looks like a little seahorse. And this one's really important for AP psychology because they like to ask questions about the hippocampus because it helps to form long-term memories. It's a major player in the memory system. So the hippocampus helps to form memories. And then lastly for today is the basal ganglia. Basal, it means base, and ganglia means like ball of nerves. There's several different things that ganglia references, but if you think of it as this little ball of nerves, and what it is, the basal ganglia is a series of structures that really help with our procedural learning and the decisions of what procedures to take. So for instance, I was thinking, if you think about the cerebellum that Mr. Woodard was talking about back here, you can see it here. It looks like a little brain. Cerebellum means little brain. The cerebellum allows me, if I'm playing baseball, the cerebellum allows me to keep balance when I'm standing at the plate ready to hit. So I can just stand there because my cerebellum is helping with balance. Now, as the pitch is coming, the basal ganglia is going to take over and help me decide whether to swing at the pitch, whether to duck out of the way if the ball is coming right at me, whether to not swing at all. So the basal ganglia is going to be higher level movements as it's kicking in the procedural memory. And so that's the basal ganglia. All right, again, I know I kind of went with the etymologies, just thinking about what the different words mean in Latin. Hopefully that'll help. I'm sure Mr. Woodard and myself, as we continue to go back and review these, will give you different devices to help you remember not only the terms, but their functions.